Hello, my name is Joanne Seward, and I'm the Technical Services Librarian at the Oak Creek Public Library. Thank you for viewing this second video in the Intermediate Microsoft Office series. Today's topic is Excel. We will explore additional practical uses for spreadsheet programs, and we'll practice editing a spreadsheet, chart, as well as a table. Users can store data, analyze that data, use formulas, and create graphical representations of that data in an easy-to-use platform. The objectives, what we're going to be focusing on specifically in this video, we're going to edit a spreadsheet and sort the data. We're going to insert and delete rows and columns, use a formula, conditional formatting, comments, and freeze panes. We're going to create and edit a chart from the spreadsheet data. And lastly, we'll create a table and sort and filter that data, as well as delve into advanced formulas. Just as a quick reminder, let's discuss the parts of the window. So at the top is the ribbon. So that's in this entire section going across the top right here. Inside of the ribbon, we have tabs, file, home, insert, page layout, etc., all the way over to view. Remember, these tabs group similar actions together, and you can see the name of the group, which groups it even more closely together, is at the bottom of the ribbon. So in the Home tab, the very first group is Clipboard. So it has Cut, Copy, Paste, and Format Painter in there. In the Font group, we have all the different things that we can do with fonts, changing the size, changing the color, making it underlined, etc. All right, underneath there, this top, right underneath kind of Clipboard, where it says A1 currently, this is the address box or the name box. This is basically letting you know what current cell that you're in. So if I started typing, it would go in cell A1. To the right of there, we have the formula bar. The formula bar is a good place to know if you have used a formula for something. So a lot of times when you use a formula, it eventually just looks like numbers. So any of these right here could actually be formulas. It's not until you click on them and then look in the formula bar, that's when you'll actually see, oh, somebody used a formula in order to get this number, this 89 right here. Okay. Underneath there, we have the row headings, the column headings. So it starts with A, B, C, goes all the way over to U, goes to Z, there we go, and then it starts over, A, B, and so on, all the way over. Okay. On the left-hand side, we have the row headings, 1 all the way down to 23, and it goes all the way down. I think it's 1 million and something rows, lots of space. At this bottom left-hand corner, we have the tabs. So within every workbook, so that's this entire thing, there are, you can have up to 255 worksheets. So these individual sheets by just clicking on the plus sign and creating new sheets. And then lastly, the status bar is going across the bottom right here. And the most important thing in here is the zoom. So remember, if you click on the minus sign, that zooms out. So it gets smaller. If you click on the plus sign, it zooms in and it makes it larger. Here we go. All right, so that's just a quick review of the parts of the window. So now we are going to edit our spreadsheet. So we're using this pre-created Algebra 101 spreadsheet. So the idea is we are the teacher and we're keeping track of our students and all of their scores. Okay, so the first thing we're going to do is go to cell A1. So you can see that's our active cell. We know because it has that green cell selector box around it. And you can see, actually, if we look in the formula bar, you'll be able to see it a little bit better, that algebra is misspelled. So the problem is, if I hit backspace right now, it's going to delete the entire thing. Here, let me just do it real quick. And see, it's all gone, which is not what we wanted. We just need to quickly fix the actual spelling in here. So I just did the undo arrow up here to bring it back. You can double click in this actual box, but sometimes it's a little hard to tell exactly where you're going to end up. So I actually like to edit the text in the formula bar itself. So I'm just going to click between the G and the B. Oops, there we go. See, I clicked and I was able to tell I was in the wrong space. And I'm just going to type in the E that I was missing. So Algebra 101. There we go. Okay. All right, I'm going to press enter on the keyboard to kind of cement it back in there. I'm going to go back onto cell A1 and let's do some font formatting. So I'm going to make this bold by clicking on the B, and I'm going to make it underlined by clicking on this U. The next thing I want to do is make this look more like the title. So I'm going to do merge and center. So I'm going to select cells A1 over to E1 because E1 is the last column that there's anything in there. And then in the alignment group of the home tab, I'm going to choose merge and center. So just as a reminder, merge and center takes all of the cells that you have selected and merges it into one big cell. So it used to be 5 individual cells and now it's one big cell. And the text is centered in that cell. So typically you do that for titles so that it stands out a little bit more. So we're going to go down and we're going to add one last student in here that we forgot to add in. So the last name is Chen and the first name is Lee. Okay, notice what happened when I typed in Lee. All of a sudden it popped in Lily because if you look in B13 right here, I had already typed Lily. So Excel does this because it's trying to be helpful so that you don't have to type in the same name or text or whatever it is every single time. But sometimes it's a little too helpful, aka I don't want Lily. So the easiest way to get rid of this is actually to use the delete key. So remember that delete deletes everything to the right of the cursor. So we're going to do delete and there we go. Now it's gone. So now I can move on and put in the rest of her score. So I'm just using the tab key to move over to the right to cell C24. And I'm going to put in her score. I'm going to use tab again, put in the score, tab again, put in the score. All right, and then I'm going to press enter to once again just kind of cement everything into that cell. All right, and then the last thing I'm going to do is go back up and I'm going to use Autofit so that I can see all of their names. So you can kind of see that it's cutting off, like especially Kawamura right there. And even last name, the E, and first name, the E at the end right there, it's cutting it off. So you can go in between the column headings and you see how my cursor changed. I can do click, hold, and drag and I can make it however wide that I want. It's totally up to you. Or you can do what's called auto fit. So I'm going to double click. So go to that same exact place and I'm going to double click 1, 2. And you can see now I can see everything in here. So auto fit means that it automatically fits it up to the longest word or sentence in whatever cell. So in this case, last name was probably the longest, or Kawamura. All right, I'm going to do the same thing in column B. So between B and C, and just to keep it consistent, I'm going to do the same thing for the rest of the column. So go between C and D, double click, go between D and E, double click, between E and F, double click. Here we go. So now it's all spread out or tightened as is appropriate. Okay. So the next thing that we want to do is sort our data. Specifically, we want to sort by their last names. So whenever you're sorting, when it's not a table, and this is not a table, you'll see the difference. We'll use a table at near the end of class. Whenever you're sorting, you need to be very careful about what you're actually selecting. So the problem is, let's say with these last names, if I wanted to sort these last names and I did click, hold, and drag to select them, I'm going to zoom out a second so we can see everything. There we go. And I selected just these last names. If I sort just those last names right now, sort A to Z, for example, it's telling me that all of this data on the other side right now is not going to be moving, basically. So you want to be careful with what you select. So you don't want to have just one column be sorted or just one row and everything else to be staying the same, because then it wouldn't be going with the appropriate person, etc. So what we want to do is we want to select all of our data across the columns and rows. We don't want to select, in this case, the last name, first name, etc., because last name would actually get sorted in with the actual last names. So it would go after like Johnson, and before Lopez. That's not what we want. Those are column headings. So we're very carefully only selecting what we actually want to have sorted. So now we can go back to this editing group and the sort and filter right here. And now we can choose, let's do sort A to Z. All right, and it didn't give me any error message or warning. And so the very first person is Elliot Anderson. And then we have Chris Anderson, and then down to Quinn Young. So now it's sorted, and then all of their quiz scores have moved appropriately along with it. Okay. So let's do Z to A just for giggles. Go back to, so that's still selected. You need to make sure it's selected. And I'm going to do sort Z to A. So now the first person is Quinn Young and the last person is Chris Anderson. So now we need to talk about how to sort by multiple levels, essentially. So in this case, we want to sort by their last name, but then also by their first name, because there's multiple Johnsons and there's multiple Andersons. So we want to make sure that they're sorted first by their last name and then by their first name. Okay, so what we're going to do in order to achieve this is go back to, we have all of our text selected that we need to sort. We're going to go back to sort and filter, and this time we're going to choose custom sort. So right now it's sorting by the last name. Sort on is always values. We want to leave that alone. And right now it's Z to A. Let's just change it back to A to Z like we're used to. So what we need to do now though is add a level. So we're going to click on add level. Notice how this first row says sort by, and then the next one says then by. So it's going to sort by the last names, and then in this case we want to choose first name. All right, and it's A to Z as well. That's exactly what we want. Click OK. All right, and there it is. So we have Chris Anderson, Elliot Anderson, and then we have Sabrina Johnson, Wade Johnson, and Winton Johnston. So they are all sorted alphabetically by their last name and then by their first name. So if you need to do multiple levels of sorting, you always have to do this custom sort right there. Okay. Or for example, if I wanted to sort just by their first names, I would have to select the data again and go to the custom sort. And I would have to remove this level right here. I just clicked on it and do delete level. And then sort by, I would choose first name instead. So it always, whenever you select the data, it always defaults to whatever the first column is typically, that's what it wants to sort by. So if you need to force it to do something else, like you wanted to do by the final quiz score, or the quiz 2 or quiz 1 or any of these columns other than the first one, then you would have to do that custom sort and choose it in here. So if I did first name and then click OK, there we go. So now we have Anna Lopez and Chris Anderson and Claire Henderson, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. In this case, I don't want to do that, so I'm going to click on undo to get it back to the way that it was before. Okay. All right. So the next thing we're going to do is find and replace text. If you watched the intermediate word video, this is done exactly the same way. So in the editing group, again, we have find and select. If I click on there, and I'm going to choose find. So I'm going to type in, I'm looking for Claire. And you know, obviously in this case, it'd be pretty easy to find her name. It's not like there's 5 million different students, but just imagine you're working with a much larger worksheet that's going, you know, all the way past Z and all the way down to row 1000 or et cetera. This is when find and replace definitely comes in handy. So I'm going to click on find next, and you can see it took me straight to cell B9. So you can see it's got the active cell selector around B9. If I did find next again, if there was multiple instances of Claire, then it would move to the next person or the next, you know, name, et cetera. Okay. All right. So what we want to do now, though, is we realize that her name is actually spelled incorrectly. So we're going to do replace, and we want to type it in correctly. Just a reminder, whenever you're doing replace, make sure that you use uppercase or lowercase as is appropriate, because that's exactly how it will take it. So in this case, I want to make sure to do a capital C, and then Claire has an I in there. All right, so once I have it typed in the way that I want, I do replace. And now you can see B9 has Claire with an I. Okay, so if I click on close, and that takes me out of the find and replace. All righty. So now let's talk about how to insert rows and columns. So there's actually a couple different ways to do this. We'll show one way with inserting a column and then a different way with inserting a row. But you can really do the same kind of thing for a row and a column. It just depends on what you prefer. So in this case, we forgot that there was quiz 1, quiz 2, and then there's actually a quiz 3 before the final quiz. So we missed a complete quiz in here. So we need to insert a column between D and E. Typically, whenever you're inserting something, you always want to go after wherever you want it inserted. So just imagine that imaginary line, you want to go after it. So one way that we can do this is by right-clicking on this column heading E right here, brings up this menu, and we want to choose Insert. And you can see, there we go, it popped an empty column in as E. And then what used to be column E is now pushed over to column F. So we need to type in the quiz scores for quiz number 3. So I'm just giving you a moment to type in all of these scores. Somebody got 100, woohoo! I don't have a number pad on this keyboard, so it makes it much more difficult to type all these numbers in. All right, there we go. Okay, so now we got all of the quiz number 3 scores in there. So now we're going to talk about how to insert a row. So in this case, there is a student that joined mid-semester, and so we need to add her into this list of names. So her last name is Hendricks, and so it needs to go after Claire Henderson right there. So once again, we're going to go after where we want to insert the row. In this case, so I could right-click on row 10 right there and do insert. So just like I did for column E. Or let's show you the other way. I can click on A10, and really you could click on any one of these, any cell in row 10 would work. But what we need to do then is go up here to the cells group, and under insert, we want to click on the word insert. And in this case, we want to do row. So if we click on insert sheet rows, and there we go. Now we have a blank column or a blank row 10 that's got. Type in the person's last name. Oops, if I'm in the correct cell. Hendricks. First name is Amber. All right, so the other thing with Amber Hendricks is since she joined class mid-semester, she doesn't have a quiz 1 score on file. So we're going to skip over and we are going to type in 84 for her quiz 2 and type in the rest of her quiz scores. There we go. So now we have Amber Hendricks in there. All right, so if you need to delete a row or column, the difference between deleting and inserting is you typically always want to be on whatever row or column you want to delete. So if I want to delete like row 11 right here, I could right click on 11 itself and choose delete, okay? Or I could click on any of the cells in row 11 and I could choose delete right here. And in this case, I would do delete sheet rows. If I wanted to delete like column F, I would click anywhere on column F and choose delete sheet columns. Or I could right click on F and choose delete. So you can see there's a couple of different ways that you can do it. It's whichever way that you prefer. So inserting, you always have to be after wherever you want to insert something, and delete, you always want to be directly on whatever it is that you're going to be deleting. So those are the key kind of differences. So now we're going to talk about how to do the average formula. Okay, so in this case, the quiz scores is a very good example of doing the average. So remember, average is, it will add up all of the numbers. So in this case, all of the scores. So, and there's 4 quiz scores, and then it will divide it by that number. So in this case, 4, because there's 4 of them. So I'm going to create a new column heading that says averages. And I just moved down to cell G4, and I'm going to go into the editing group, and we have auto sum right here. If I click on the down arrow, it gives me some of the other kind of most common kind of basic formulas that people use. So we're going to do average. And you can see we got our little marching ants, as I like to call them, are going around the numbers, which is exactly what we want. And then it gives us our actual formula. So it's equals average C4 through F4. So it's letting us know it's taking C4, D4, E4, F4, adding them together, and in this case, dividing them by 4. So all we have to do now is press enter. Okay, so the average for Chris Anderson is 78.75. And this is kind of what I was talking about before about the formula bar, how right now this just looks like 78.75. How do I know that I didn't add up all of these with a calculator and then just typed it in manually? If I go back onto G4, now you can see it says 78.75 in the cell G4, but in the formula bar, it actually says equals average C4 through F4. So that's how you know for sure that this is an actual formula. So rather than having to do the exact same thing all the way down, we're going to make our life a lot, make it a lot more simple. And we're going to go into this bottom right corner to get our copy cursor. That's a black plus sign. Click, hold, and drag all the way down until we get to Quinn Young, the last person, and then let go. All right, and there we go. There are all of our quiz scores. Let me point out real quick with Amber Hendricks right here. If we had put 0 in here, let me just put 0 real quick. Notice what happened to her average. It went down very, very far because if you don't have anything in here, it's not taking that as a separate number. So in this case, it's only taking these 3 numbers and dividing it by 3 because there are only 3 numbers. So if I had put in 0, it would assume that's a number. And so it would take all of those numbers, add them together, and then divide by 4, which would be incorrect. So I just wanted to point that out real quick. I also, it never hurts to look at one of these that you did when you did the copy cursor and dragged it down just to see if it worked correctly. So like for Anna Lopez, it's 85.5 is her average. And then if I look, it says equals average C16 to F16, and she's in row 16 right there. So yes, that worked correctly. I always get a little bit paranoid when I use the copy cursor to make sure that it is working correctly. So, all right. So the next thing that we're going to do is talk about conditional formatting. Conditional formatting is a great kind of tool to be able to use. Basically, it's telling Excel that there are certain cells that you want to have formatted in a particular way, like you want them to be red or blue or purple or etc., if it meets a certain set of criteria. So in this case, we want to apply conditional formatting to our quiz scores. So I'm just going to select, starting with cell C4, I'm going to do click, hold, and drag, and down to F25. So I don't want the averages, I'm just looking for the quiz scores themselves right here, okay? So we're going to go up to the styles group and click on conditional formatting, and we have this highlight cells rules. So you can do if something is greater than, if it's less than, if it's between 2 numbers, if it equals something in particular, if it has text that contains, you know, certain things, if it's a specific date, if there are duplicate values. So there's a lot of different things that you can apply as far as conditional formatting, which is super helpful. So in this case, I'm going to choose, let's do less than, just to see. And you can see it automatically actually already put something in there. So I don't know how it figures out that number exactly, but that's what it did. So right now it's formatting the cells that are less than 77, so anything 76 and below, as light red fill with dark red text. So you can see like Chris Anderson, his quiz number 2 score, Elliot Anderson, quiz number 1 score, Claire Henderson, all her scores except for the final quiz, and so on and so forth, okay? All right, so in this case though, let's do custom so that we can change what it's going to look like. So I'm going to click on this custom format and click, click OK. And then we can make changes in here. So let's say that I want it to show up as bold, the font. If I go to the border tab and let's say I want to give it an outline, so it'll put a box, basically a line around the border. And let's go to fill, and instead of red, let's change it to purple for fun. And then click OK. And also, let's say for the quiz score in this specific example, let's say that anything actually below 75 is a D or F. Let's say it's an F, 75. Oops, I put 775. 75, there we go. All right. So now that I have it formatted exactly the way I want, I click OK. If I click off of the cells, you can see there are all of the cells that apply to that conditional formatting that we set. So what's kind of nice in this example is with the test scores, you can do this conditional formatting so that you don't have to look at it, your kind of rubric and be like, okay, was 75 a D, or was it 74 was a D, etc. So this way you can just set your conditional formatting and be like, oh yeah, purple means that that's a D. And then you could select all of these cells and do their conditional formatting again. And you could do the numbers between. So anything between 75 and 82 are whatever kind of formatting you want. And then click OK. And now anything that is red is a C or a D or whatever. And you could do that for all of these quiz scores so that you could very quickly be like, okay, so Chris Anderson got a C on quiz number 1, a D on quiz number 2, on number 3, he got a B, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So, all right, I'm going to do undo just because I don't need that extra set of formatting that I just put on there. But all right, so that's conditional formatting. So I've definitely used it in the past, and it is a very helpful additional little tool that Excel has. So now we're going to do comments. So comments are nice because it's something that doesn't show when you print something. So comments are basically, imagine a little tiny Post-it note that you're putting on your actual spreadsheet. So it's a digital Post-it note is basically the best way I can describe it. So the example here that we want to use a comment for is definitely Amber Hendricks quiz number 1 score. Because let's say we're looking at this a year later and we're like, wait, why does she have nothing for her quiz number 1 score? That is weird. I don't understand why it's that way. That's one of those examples where you want to do a comment. So what we're going to do is I clicked on cell C10 so that it became selected. And then I'm going to right click on the cell and make sure you don't do insert because insert will insert a row or a column depending on where you are. You want to make sure to select insert comment. So if I click on insert comment, it pops up with basically what it looks like, a little Post-it note. And you can type in whatever you want to type in here. So I'm going to type in my little note. There we go. So that way I know whenever I see this, oh yeah, that's right. She didn't, she joined math class mid-semester, and that's why there's no score on file for her for this one. So if I click off to the side, it actually disappears. See, it's not in there at all. But you can see there's still a little red triangle around at the top right corner of C10. If I hover my mouse on there, now my little comment has popped up. There it is. Okay. So if you need to edit a comment, if you right click on that cell and instead of insert comment, now it has edit comment. I can do edit comment and then I can change whatever text that I want in here. Let me change the name. There we go. And once again, just click off to the side. Just so you know, before you click off, you can change the size of this. So if it's too small, you can use these corner move handles and you can make the note as big as you want it. Doesn't matter at all. If I click off to the side, it disappears. If I hover back on it, there it is. Okay. Lastly, if you need to delete a comment, if you click on your cell, right click, and then you can choose delete comment in here. The little red corner will go away. If I hover my mouse on there, there's nothing. Okay. All right, so comments, once again, are definitely super useful. The main thing being it allows you to type in these notes without having them be printed. Okay. The next thing we're going to talk about are freeze panes. So there are definitely times where you're working with a spreadsheet where it is too large. So I'm going to click on the plus sign over here just to zoom in, just to give you an idea. We'll talk about it that way. Okay, so as you can see now, it only goes up to row 18. So there's more rows down here. But notice as I scroll, what happened to my column headings? So the last name, first name, quiz 1, etc. I can't see it, right? I'd have to scroll back up. Oh yeah, that's right. Quiz 1 was column C, etc. So freeze panes allows you to freeze a certain section of your actual spreadsheet so that when you scroll, you're actually going to still see it. So this one is a little bit weird because a lot of times when you're creating a spreadsheet, you may just have it where the first row has what you want to have frozen. But in this case, we have row 1 is actually the title, which doesn't really help us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to cell A4 because it's underneath where I want to actually freeze it. And then I'm going to go to the View tab. And in the window group, I'm going to choose freeze panes. Freeze panes. So we have freeze panes, we have freeze top row. So if the top row was our column headings, this last name, first name, etc., that would work perfect. We'll do that. Freeze first column if we have the table going the opposite way where we had like the last name, first name, and then their names and etc. You could do freeze first column, but both of these are not going to work for me. So I need to choose this freeze pane. So that's why I had to go underneath where I actually wanted it to be frozen. So if I click on freeze panes, this little gray line, hopefully you can see it, has popped up. If I scroll down, look at the last name, first name, quiz 1 scores, there they are, see? So I can scroll down as much as I want. I'm down to row 149, there we go. And it still is there. Those still have those first 3 rows are frozen. I can scroll back up and there they are. This doesn't affect how it's printed at all. It's only purely for viewing in Excel, okay? We'll talk a little bit about print titles in just a bit. Okay, so the other kind of random thing to point out, if you need to unfreeze it, if you go back to freeze panes and choose unfreeze panes, then it will unfreeze it. I've also had people ask me how to freeze multiple kind of sections. So let's say that you wanted the first column or the first 2 columns, and you also wanted the first 3 rows. Once again, you want to go after wherever you want it frozen. So in this case, then I would go to C4. So I want anything frozen above row 4 and anything frozen to the left of C. So if I go to freeze panes and choose freeze panes right again, now you can see I can have a cross section line. So I can scroll down and that's all still there, okay? And then I can scroll to the right and A and B are still there, okay? So you can freeze kind of these different cross sections, basically is the best way I can think of it as well for, so whatever you need. So I'm gonna do unfreeze panes because I don't need all of that. I'm gonna zoom out again just so that you can see everything. There we go. All right, so that was freeze panes. So now we're gonna talk about charts. I'm going to insert a chart. One of the main things with charts to keep in mind is you want to select all of the data that you want in the chart, and you want to make sure that anything you don't want in the chart is not selected. So I'm going to select cells B3, starting with this first name, to F25. So look at what is not selected. We don't want the last names, which is kind of in this point just a little bit of extraneous information. We don't want the averages. This is real important in this case because the averages would skew how our graph would actually look. So the averages is not what we want to actually include in this. And then we're also excluding the title, okay? So we have 3 pieces of information that we're not including, but all of this center stuff we want actually in our chart. So I'm going to go to the Insert tab. And then there's the charts group right here. We're going to select kind of the most basic chart that you can do, this column or bar chart. I'm going to click on there. So we have 2D column, we have 3D column, we have 2D bar, we have 3D bar. I know the 3D columns are so tempting to choose, but here's the thing. We as humans don't like to read them. They confuse us. So even though it may look super fancy and everything else like that, I wouldn't recommend necessarily choosing a 3D column chart. I would stick with kind of more basic, the 2D column. So I'm going to stick once again with more basic, which is this clustered column, and I click on there, and there is our chart right there. So the first thing we're going to do is move this. In this case, it's not over our actual data, so it's not really in the way, so to speak. You can always click, hold, and drag, and you can move it wherever you want on the actual sheet itself. But what I'm going to show you how to do is move it to so that it's its own separate sheet. So I'm going to choose Move Chart in this contextual tab that just popped up, this Chart Tools Design. So in the location group, I'm going to click on Move Chart. And you can see right now it's set as an object in sheet 1, so I can move it to a different sheet if we had multiple sheets. Or what we're going to do is put it as a new sheet completely. And you can give it a different name if you didn't want chart 1. You could give it a different name right now, as you know, if you wanted. but we're just going to leave it. So I'm going to click on OK. All right, and there is our chart as basically almost a full page. If I go back to sheet 1, our chart is gone off of there, okay? All right, so let's format our chart a little bit. So the first thing that I'm going to do is change what right now says chart title, and I want to change it to Algebra 101. So I just clicked in that actual text box, and I'm going to type in, I'm going to delete it and type in algebra. Oops. If I don't have issues, come on. Sometimes it's a little bit persnickety when you're trying to edit charts, so just be careful. All right, Algebra 101, there it is, okay? So now what we want to do is, if we're looking over here at the left-hand vertical axes, you can see it goes from 0 up to 120. Well, here's the thing about this. With test scores, what's the highest test score that you can technically have? 100, right? So we don't need it to go past 100. The reason that Excel does this, it always gives you a little bit buffer. It doesn't want to have typically the highest number at the very top of the chart. In this case, we don't care. We're just going to make it do it. So we can actually change these numbers a bit over here on the side. So I'm going to click on this vertical axis so that this is selected. You can see there's a box all the way around it. And I'm going to carefully right click. Oh, see, I didn't do it carefully enough. There we go. And I'm going to choose Format Axes in here. So this little Format Axes pane popped up on the right-hand side. And in here right now, the bounds, you can see it's set from 0, because we have starts with 0, to the maximum is 120. So I'm going to click in here and I'm going to change it, use backspace to 100. And if I press enter, all right, see now it's gone from 0 to 100. And you can see this major units is 10. So if I wanted it not to go up by 10s, I could change that in here as well. So there's a lot of different kind of things that you can manipulate in here. For right now though, that's all we're going to do with this one. So I'm going to click on the X to close out of the Format Axes pane. Okay, the next thing that we're going to do is change the format, or we're going to format the legend a little bit. So the legend is at the very bottom right here, this quiz 1, quiz 2, quiz 3, final quiz. I'm going to click on there and I'm going to right click on it and choose Format Legend. So we're just formatting these individual pieces, basically is the best way to describe it. All right, so this Format Legend navigation pane pops up on the right-hand side. And from here, the main thing that we're going to change is this legend position. So right now it's set to the bottom. I want to actually change it to the top. So if I click on top, and you can see there it is. So it moved it underneath, for some reason, the title, okay? I'm going to click on the X to close out of this. And now what I want to do is kind of move things around a little bit. So I can actually move the legend to a different area. So I'm going to do click, hold, and drag. I'm going to put it up at this top right corner right here. There we go. And let's say I want Algebra 101. I want to move it over to the left-hand corner. And there we go, okay? I click off to the side, and there is our completed chart. And you can definitely change, you can change the color of all of these. There's lots of different things that you can kind of fiddle with. If you watch the intermediate PowerPoint video, which will be posted shortly, then in there, I'll also talk about how to edit the color and everything else like that as well. So we'll do some more editing of a chart in that. All right, so we're gonna change gears a little bit, and now we're gonna do a table. So we need to open, I created a address book spreadsheet for us to mess around with. So I'm gonna go ahead and open that from the flash drive. So here we go, address book, open. Okay, so there it is. So this is just a basic address book. And I actually have something very similar to this for my personal use. It's a little bit more robust though. So I have, home phone, cell phone, work phone. I have birth dates in there. I have email addresses. I have a lot of different info in my actual address book, my Excel file that I have. So we're going to talk about how to create or how to make this into a table. It's actually a fairly simple process. All you have to do is click just anywhere on one of the cells, use Control-A, the keyboard shortcut, to select all of those cells. So that'll select anything that has text in it. And then we want to go to the Insert tab and choose in the Tables group, Table. So if we click on Table, make sure you keep this, check mark, my table has headers, because it does. and then click on OK. All right, and then if I click off to the side, there is my table. So you can see how it already looks quite a bit different than what it did originally. The main way that you know that something is a table is typically these little down arrows on the actual headings across the top, okay? Or if there's headings on the side, etc. All right, but there is our table. So like I said, not too bad. All right, so now we're going to talk about how to sort within a table. So sorting within a table is actually much easier than sorting without it being a table, like I was showing you before. So if it's not in a table, you have to be very careful about selecting the text that you want to actually sort. When it is in a table, you don't have to worry about that. So it will automatically move any accompanying cells with it. So what we're going to do is go to the Home tab, and we're going to go to the Sort and Filter group right here. And I'm going to choose this Custom Sort again. And you can see it automatically selected everything in there. Very, very nice. Okay. So in the Sort By, I'm going to choose, let's do last name again, because that makes sense. All right. And we want it to A to Z. Yes. And then we're going to do another level right away, which is first name. So just like we did before, starting by their last name and then by their first name. And then we're going to click OK. And you can see that it starts with Jenny Anderson and goes to Ray Avery and Aubrey Dooley, etc. And then here are all the Fishers: Andrew, Chris, Janet, Karen, Quincy, Soraya, Stephen, Will, and so on and so forth. Okay. So it's all sorted by last name and then by first name. I also want to point out in a table, what's kind of nice is you can tell that it's actually sorted, because if you look at the column heading, so last name, there's a down arrow still, but then there's also an up arrow. Same thing for the first name. So that's how you know that it's sorted. If you ever see an arrow like this, that's how you know that it's actually sorted that it's actually sorted in like alphabetical or numerical order. All right, print titles is what we're going to talk about now. So what I want to do is just show you what this is going to look like if it prints. So I'm going to go to File and Print. All right, and I'm going to change it from portrait to landscape orientation just so that you can see it. Okay, so here's last name, first name, all the way over to zip code. But notice there are 2 pages. So if I click on the arrow to the right, now we just have the last couple of people's names. But notice there's no last name, first name, address, all of that kind of stuff, right? AKA the column headings are not getting printed. So that is what's called print titles. So I have to go back to our actual spreadsheet. And in order to force it to print these titles on every single page that we want to print, I have to go to the Page Layout tab. And then in the Page Setup group right here, we want to choose Print Titles. So you can see there's the print area. Don't worry about that. We have the print title. So we have rows to repeat at top and columns to repeat at left. So if you wanted columns to repeat on every single page, you could choose that in here. In this case, we want to do just the rows. So I'm going to click on this little arrow, and it's going to allow me to select whatever row or rows that I wanted. So in this case, I want just row 1, so I'm going to click only on the number 1. And you can see it's selected it now all the way across, and it has the $1 through $1. That's letting us know that's the absolute reference. It's going to take all of row 1. So if I click on this little down arrow right here to get my box to pop back up and then click OK, it doesn't change anything as you're actually viewing it. However, if I go back to File and Print, so here's page 1 with our column headings, and then Moment of Truth, page 2, there it is, last name, first name, street address, city, etc., etc., etc. So I have people asking me how to do this all the time. So that's just this page layout, and then the print titles is what you're specifically looking for. Okay. All right, so now we're going to talk about how to filter within a table. One of the other main advantages of using a table over just regular typing in your text into a spreadsheet is the ability to filter it. So filtering is basically what it sounds like. It's just being able to see only the data that you want and then hiding the other data. So let's start with state. So to filter it, I can click on this little down arrow, and you can see I can sort in here right away. And then we have the filtering in here. So it's showing me right now a list of every single thing that's in this column. What I want to do is click on this select all check mark, and it will actually unselect all of these different states in this case. So let's say that I wanted to only see Wisconsin. So if I click on the check, the little box next to Wisconsin to get a check mark in there, and then click OK, now it's only showing me Wisconsin. That's it. So you can see it stops at row 39. And you can tell that it's filtered because it goes from row 1 to row 10. So where's, 2 through 9, they're hidden because we just filtered it. And it goes 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, and then jumps to 18. And then we have 19, jumps to 21, etc. And you can also tell that these are blue. That's once again a visual cue to let you know that there are other rows of data that is just hidden at this point in time. Okay. We can do additional filtering even on top of this. So let's say we wanted to now filter as well for the city. If I click on the down arrow, click on the check mark to unselect them, and let's choose just like Milwaukee, and then click OK, and there we go. So now those are only ones that are displaying. And you can see once again in the city and state, notice there's this little additional symbol. This is supposed to be a funnel, if you can't tell. So we have it sorted by last name and by first name. You can see with the arrows, and then it's letting us know it's filtered by city and state. Okay. If you need to clear any of the filters, the easiest / quickest way is if you go to the Home tab, and then in this Sort and Filter group, you want to do Clear. Make sure you don't do Clear right here because that will clear the actual contents of the cell or of the entire spreadsheet, depending on what you have selected. So make sure you're in Sort and Filter and then choose Clear. There we go. And you can see now it's removed all of the filtering as well as all of the sorting. See, there's no little arrows by the first name, last name. There's no little funnels by the city, state. So it's cleared all of your sorting and your filtering. Okay. All right. So the next thing that we're going to do is talk about worksheet that we created. So give me one moment. We're going to do the supplies order form. All right, so this is an example supplies order form, like something that you might have to fill in for work of various things that you want purchased. So cell reference. So whenever you're talking about doing advanced formulas or functions, you're basically talking about doing cell reference. A cell reference refers to a cell or a range of cells on a worksheet. And by default, Excel typically uses relative references. However, they're also absolute and mixed references. So I'm just going to go down here to the very bottom and kind of give you an example. So if I typed in equals sum D3 through D4. So that's considered, oops, D4. There you go. So that's considered a relative reference, okay? Because if I copied these, then it would change this formula. So typically if you dragging it down, then it would be doing D4 through D5 or, whatever it is, okay? An absolute reference always uses a $sign. So if I did $sign D3 through D4, oops. Okay, oops, didn't mean to add that extra. No. There we go. There we go. Okay, so, and actually let's do the $sign D4 as well. So that means no matter what, it would always be D3 through D4. Even if I copied this down using that bottom copy cursor, it would always take the sum of D3 and D4 all the way down, okay? Mixed reference is if I get rid of this $sign and do both. So I'll have the relative is this D4, and then the absolute is that $sign D3. So if I use the copy cursor and drag it down, it'll stay D3, but then it'll be then D3 through D5, and D3 through D6, and D3 through D7, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, okay? So that's kind of just a real quick sum up of what a cell reference is and in regards to formulas. And you'll see as we create an actual formula in just a little bit. Let's talk about how to do a running total. So in this spreadsheet where we're keeping track of all of the expenses of just kind of the general supplies that we're purchasing for our work, this is a very great example of when to use the running total so we have an idea of how much is left of our actual budget. So I just want to point out real quick that you can see the estimated price column has parentheses around it. That means that this is a negative number. So when we typed it in, and we actually typed in this minus 29.99, okay? If it wasn't a negative number, then we wouldn't see the parentheses around it. And this is just for a table. If it wasn't a table, then you would actually see the minus 29.99, and that's how you know that it's negative. And then we also have the final cost column is what we're actually going off of for our running total. So what we're going to do is first add in a new row to put our actual running total balance. So I'm going to right click on two and choose insert. I'm going to type in the date. So this is the fourth quarter. So it started with 10/1 and we're doing 2019. And I'm going to move over, and for the item name or description, I'm going to put in fourth quarter balance. Okay, and then we're going to move all the way to K2, and we're going to type in what that balance is. So in this case, 5,000. And notice right now that it doesn't really look like actual currency because there's no dollar sign, there's no comma, all of that kind of stuff. But watch what happens when I click off on cell L1. You can see it actually formatted it as if it was currency. That's because this table, this column in particular, column K, is already set to be formatted that way. So you can see that all of the amounts in K are already set up to look like actual currency. So that's why it did that. If it wasn't set up that way, then when we typed in 5,000 like that, it would just look like 5000. Okay. So we're going to type in cell L1. We want a column heading for running total. Oops. Running total. And if I press enter, it takes me down to cell L2, and then you can see all of the cells now are formatted. Once again, this is because it's a table. It knows that because this is next to the cells that are already a table, that this also should be part of the table. And so that's why they became formatted. Okay. So what we're going to do is we are going to put in our formula, which is equals sum, because that's what we're trying to do is get the sum of all of these numbers. And we're going to do parentheses K. And then this is when we need to use that dollar sign for the absolute reference. So $2, meaning that it's always going to start with K2 right here. And then we're going to go the colon K2, because that's where we are currently in right now. So, and parentheses to finish up the formula, and then press enter. And there it is. So our running total starting with the very beginning is 5,000, because that's the total amount that we have at the moment. And then if we go down to cell L3, you can see it already automatically populated all of the formulas in the following cells. That's once again because it's a table. So you can see the total right now is right there. And if we look in the formula bar, it's letting us know it's taking the equal sum of K2. So it's still taking from K2 through K3, which is right here. So that's why this number right here is 4,970.01 cents. If we go down again to the next one is 4,942.51 because it's taking the sum of K2 through K4. So it's taking K2, K3, K4, adding them all together. And then that's how we get our total, our running total. If I scroll down all the way to the very bottom, you will see that our final amount, what we have left, is $293.79. So that's our running total, which is very, very useful whenever you're doing something like this with budgeting, to have this kind of running total, to have an idea of how much you are using, essentially. Okay. So the last formula that we're going to talk about is the sum if formula. So I'm going to scroll over. I already created a section for this right here. So the sum if, basically in this case, we're doing, we want to know what our total is for anything that is a game. So anything in here, so this is all the description right here is in column D, the item name and description. So anything in column D that has the word game in it, it will take the total from that final balance column right here, K, and it will put all of those totals in here in this cell. And then the same thing for puppet, the same thing for toy. We could do labels, bookmarks. So whatever basically criteria, whatever text that you want it to match, that's what it's going to find, okay? So one way that we can do this, I'm going to go to cell B141, and I'm going to type in the formula. So it's equals sum if, aka if it matches, like it says, this given condition or criteria. And then we're going to type in parentheses. I want to point this out right here where it says range, criteria, and then sum range. You want to pay attention to this stuff right here. This is called the formula autocomplete. So this is something that Excel does to give you kind of helpful suggestions and tips as to what this actually should look like. So sometimes it's this drop-down menu that you can actually choose things from. Sometimes it's just text to kind of give you an idea. So make sure that you are kind of paying attention to this. So the range where we want to have it look for the word is column D. So I'm going to type in D, and the first row is 3, and then do the end parenthesis, or sorry, the colon D138. So this very end, and you can see it's highlighted the entire thing. So anything that says game in between D3 to D138 down here, okay? And then what we're going to do is type in a comma. Yes. I moved off of it. A comma. And then we're going to enter in quotation marks and an asterisk, which is considered a wild card. And we're searching for the word game. So I'm going to do another asterisk, another quotation mark, another common. Whoops. Clicked off of it. All right, let's go back. Okay, so another comma. And then we need to type in that sum range, so where it's actually taking the numbers to add together. So in this case, that was column K, 3 through K138. Okay, so that's all the way over here. It's taking that column of data. And then if I press enter now, there we go. So it's -144.13. So $144.13 is the way most normal people would say it. So if you're not sure if this actual formula worked out correctly, one thing that you can do is you can actually filter your table. So in this case, we want to filter column D to only see things that have the word game. So if I click on this down arrow, and I could choose text filters, and then I can do contains. You don't want to do equals, because equals means it would only have the word game and nothing else in that cell. So we're just going to do contains, and I'm going to type in game and click OK. So now it's only showing me the cells that have game, okay? And if I scroll over to column K, that final cost is where we took it from, and let's just do the auto sum underneath it. So there it is, -144.13, $144.13. So it did work correctly. So I'm going to do undo because I don't want it to do that anymore. There we go. All right, and now it's not filtered, okay? So now we're going to do a different version of the same formula that we did in A141. So it's going to be similar, but not exactly the same. So you can basically do it either way, really. So I'm going to type in the formula equals sum if. So that starts out the same. We're taking it from the same range, D3 through D138. And then this is where it changes a little bit. So we're going to do quotation mark and asterisk, quotation mark. And then we're going to do the and sign, and we're taking from cell A142, so where it says puppet currently. And then we're going to do another and sign and quotation mark, asterisk, quotation mark. And then we're going for the same sum range, so the totals, for K3 through K138 and parentheses. So the only difference is right here that we typed in the actual cell that it's taking it from rather than typing in the actual word puppet. So if I press enter, so for puppet, it's 220 and 77. So once again, if I go up to the column heading for D, and if I do the text filters, contains, and puppet, And then let's go over to column K where we're getting the numbers and do the auto sum. There we go. So $220.77 matches. Okay. So that's a way just to double check to make sure that it actually matches. Okay, so I hope that you learned a couple of additional things that you might not have known about Excel previously. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to me at the library's general email, which is library@oakcreekwi.org. Hopefully I will see you for the next video, which is the intermediate PowerPoint. Otherwise, have a great day. Bye.